Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Nutritional Revolution podcast. Today, we have for you guys Dr. Scott Forbes, and he's a professor and chair in the Department of Physical Education Studies at Brandon University. He's also a scientific advisor and fellow for the International Society of Sports Nutrition and a clinical exercise physiologist and high performance specialist through the Canadian Society for Exercise Physiology. Dr. Forbes has published over 150 peer-reviewed manuscripts and 5 book chapters with a primary focus on the interaction of exercise and nutrition to optimize muscle, bone, and brain health. Love this episode. I know you guys will too. Have a blast and enjoy. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Nutritional Revolution podcast. We have for you guys Dr. Scott Forbes. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me. Happy to be here.
I'm super excited. And I'm sure our listeners are going to be super excited. Everybody's talking about creatine these days. So we are just going to dive all into it. But before we jump into the creatine conversation, I'm going to have you break down your 2 truths and a lie for me.
Okay, so here's the 3 things.
Okay.
So number 1, I competed in this obscure sport called canoe polo.
Oh.
And I competed at the World Games, which is essentially the Olympics for obscure sports.
Whoa.
Okay, so that's number 1.
Okay.
Number 2, I once bowled a perfect game.
That's rad. That's true.
Number 3, I've run a sub 33-minute 10K.
Ooh.
Yeah, those are the 3 options.
10K. That's fast. That's fast. Okay. These are good ones. It's always fun when the guest brings up their truths and lies that are stuff that's not easily found on the internet. Okay, I've never heard of this obscure games situation ever. I don't even know if that exists. And canoe polo, that sounds entertaining. But going to the World Games, I have not heard of that. I feel like bowling a perfect game can certainly happen. I feel like you look athletic and tall, like you might be able to run a sub 33-minute 10K. I'm going to go with the first one as the lie, the canoe polo, but don't tell me the answer. We will wait to reveal it at the end of the episode for our listeners and find out if you are a super fast 10K runner or what. Okay, so why don't you tell us just a little bit about what you are involved in research-wise, and then we can dive into this study. I think the study actually came out in 2022, but with the common frequency of TBIs and all that happening in cycling, I think this is a good topic to cover today. So I'll let you take it off and share a little bit about you and your research.
Okay, so yeah, most of my research involves creatine supplementation. And I've actually been studying creatine for about 17 years.
Wow.
When I was a graduate student at the University of Saskatchewan, I got to collaborate with somebody you might know, Dr. Darren Kandow.
Yes.
And my supervisor at the time was Dr. Phil Chillibeck. And they were some of the first to essentially study creatine combined with exercise in older adults and to show some of the benefits in that population. But over the past 17 years, we've kind of explored creatine's benefit for muscle performance across the lifespan in both males and females. And we've also gone beyond just muscle. We've also examined kind of the impacts on brain and bone health as well.
Amazing. And today, the article that we're going to primarily dive into is called, just for our listeners, Effects of Creatine Supplementation on Brain Function and Health. And why don't you share with us a little bit about why did we start looking at creatine supplementation and brain health? What maybe drew that together, and what drove you to kind of start looking at the study that we're going to dive into today?
For sure. So about 95% of the creatine that you have within your body is stored in the muscle. And so I think that's why a lot of the research has focused on muscle per se. But we also have creatine within our brain.
Mm-hmm.
The brain is a little bit different than muscle. It's a little bit more challenging to get it into the brain. The brain can synthesize its own creatine. But essentially, creatine is just one of those, it's a part of a specific energy system And different cells in our body need energy at different speeds or different times, I guess. And yeah, your brain needs a lot of energy. It uses a lot of energy despite its small mass. So it uses about 20% of your daily energy intake, despite
Mm.
only weighing about 2% of your body mass. So it punches way above its weight for energy use.
Wow.
And again, that creatine energy system could be a benefit for the brain.
Wow. That is really neat to think about how much of your daily energy, 20%, that is a significant amount that your brain is using to, but all the stuff you do with your brain kind of makes sense. So you mentioned PCR ATP as an energy buffer. What does that do in neurons for plain language listeners? And why would this be something that athletes or even shift workers, tactical professionals, why would we want to think about this and know about this?
For sure. So I kind of mentioned that creatine is part of an energy system.
Hmm.
So we need energy. That's very important. And one particular molecule, it's called ATP or adenosine triphosphate. So anytime a cell requires any sort of, needs to do any sort of work, and your neurons, your brains obviously use a lot of energy as well, then it needs to resynthesize or you need to make this ATP molecule. And the creatine energy system can make that molecule very, very quickly. So anytime you need that energy quickly, it could be like a really stressful situation. That particular energy system seems to be quite useful from the muscle perspective. Again, it supports the same things, that high intensity energy, and that's why it's been used quite frequently with like bodybuilding or high
Hmm.
intensity exercise, that particular system. So we have other ways to make ATP. We could use carbohydrates or glucose. Yeah, you can break down fat molecules as well,
Hmm.
but those are generally a little bit slower and not as big of a benefit when you're in these stress situations.
That's interesting. Okay, so that makes sense from what I know physiology wise of different sport intensities and what the body is pulling from initially. So, like you mentioned, the muscle, the immediate, like quick go, you're pulling from phosphocreatine, and then subsequently, depending on how long you're trying to go for, you're going to utilize different energy systems. So, the brain is similar, trying to do something. Is it the same? Like trying to do something really quick, like maybe sleeping to like trying to do something? Is it going for creatine first before mobilizing glucose and other things?
Exactly, yeah. So it
Wow.
works in a very similar way. And as I'm sure we'll get into, that's why kind of that energy system and creatine seems to be a benefit, particularly when you're in these really stressed situations, such as traumatic brain injury or sleep deprivation, hypoxia. Yeah, there's a variety of different ways to kind of stress the brain.
Hmm.
And that's where creatine seems to play a bigger role. And just based off of how fast that energy system can work and how it supports that ATP production, it makes perfect sense.
Wow. And so you had mentioned that the brain can make its own creatine, but then we have external or exogenous supplemental creatine. What are we looking at in terms of dose and how long does it take to get into the brain?
That's a great question. So yeah, at the muscle level, it's very well established that well, the muscle can't actually synthesize its own creatine, so it relies purely on dietary creatine or exogenous sources. So our liver and kidney can create creatine as well. That can get into the bloodstream and our muscles can take it up. And it's being taken up by a specific transporter called SLC6A8 or creatine transporter 1.
Mm.
And we have a lot of those creatine transporters at the muscle. So if you supplement with creatine, most people get about a 20 to maybe even 30% increase in the amount of creatine that's now stored within your muscle. At the brain, it's much different. So
Mm.
we have very few creatine transporters. So it's much more challenging to get creatine into the brain. And then, as you mentioned, our brain could actually synthesize its own creatine as well. So it kind of looks after itself a little bit better than I think our muscle does.
Hmm.
And what we know is that it's pretty challenging to actually get big increases of creatine into the
Mm,
brain. So at the brain level, it might range from 5% to 10% increase in brain creatine content. Whereas at the muscle level, it's very robust. It's pretty consistent between people, but at the brain, it seems to be quite variable
hmm,
between individuals. And to be honest, we don't know why.
mm. And so, I mean, if someone is supplementing with creatine, a good portion of that's going to muscle and maybe a smaller portion going to the brain. Is that kind of what we can take from that information?
Yeah, so we don't know exactly how it's kind of separated, I guess,
Mm,
within the body.
hmm
Um, I'm not 100% sure if the body would try to saturate the muscle first. To me, maybe it's trying to saturate the brain first,
hmm
and maybe that's why it kind of looks after the brain first. And it's harder to get any increase in the amount of creatine within the brain. But we don't know exactly how it's being partitioned once
Yeah.
it gets into the body, but we do know that most of it gets stored within the muscle.
Hmm. And for just my own curiosity, brain creatine levels. We're not testing that in humans, are we? Can we?
Yes, you can test
You
that in
can.
humans.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Okay. How do you do that?
So with a magnetic resonance spectroscopy, so
Oh,
MRS or an MRI
yeah.
essentially, so a big
Interesting.
magnet, yeah, they can you can go inside and they can look at everything from how much
Cool.
phosphocreatine that you have, how much creatine you have, and they can look at different areas of the brain as well.
Okay, okay. I was picturing rats and sampling and that kind of stuff that I didn't think we could but that makes sense. And MRI, that makes a lot more sense. And that's great that we were able to test in humans, right? And translate that there. So tell us a little bit about why someone would want to utilize creatine for brain functioning. What are you seeing in the literature that it is benefiting from a brain lens?
For sure. So anything that requires a lot of energy could benefit from this particular supplement. So, everything from attention to reaction time to executive function, like your ability to make decisions, have all been shown to be improved with creatine. And probably the most kind of benefit is actually an improvement in memory.
Hmm.
So, forming memory and learning requires a ton of energy. And yeah, there's evidence that creatine could be of benefit for that cognitive domain.
Wow. And what sample or I guess population are we looking at when we test the memory? Do we see this benefit in like elderly or pre-dementia Alzheimer's, or are we talking younger, maybe sleep deprived teenagers or something?
So we did a systematic review and meta-analysis. Essentially, we just look for all the individual studies that have been published on creatine and memory,
Mm,
and we subdivided it. So we did a sub-analysis looking at younger individuals and older adults,
mm.
and the benefits seem to be greater in the older adults.
Oh, cool.
So they're about 65 to 75 years of age.
hmm
That's where the participants in the studies that were conducted, and they found improvements in cognition.
That's great.
The younger individuals, there was no benefit on
Huh.
improving memory. So as you kind of mentioned, there could be some benefits when you're stressed, and
hmm
I alluded to that earlier as well. But in young, healthy individuals in non-stressful situations, it did not improve their cognitive performance or memory.
Interesting. Okay. And that the group it did improve, you said was 60 and up, 60 to 75-year-olds?
Yeah, approximately.
Okay. Okay. That's really fascinating. But then if we take the younger population and they're sleep deprived or got a concussion, potentially then there's a use for improving memory and cognition with creatine.
Absolutely. Yeah. So anytime your brain is really stressed, and there's a variety of different ways that that has been kind of explored in science or in the real world, we know that sleep deprivation has a negative impact on the way that our brains function, and creatine has been shown to be a benefit in that particular situation. Hypoxia. So we know that we
Mm.
need oxygen to create some ATPs. It's a different energy system, our aerobic energy system. But creatine could be a benefit when you're in a hypoxic situation. So that's a low amount when you're receiving a low amount of oxygen. We also know that there's a little bit of evidence with creatine in traumatic brain injuries. And then also mental fatigue is another way to obviously stress the brain, and creatine has been shown to be a benefit in that situation as well.
Okay, this is also fascinating. The hypoxia thing, I don't think I had heard that one before. I've heard creatine like can help with so many different things, but the hypoxia is fascinating. So could that be an athlete at an altitude training camp?
Potentially, yeah. So I'm thinking like I don't know, maybe like somebody flying a jet super
Mm.
fast and they're getting a low amount of oxygen, or
Yeah.
a firefighter that has to breathe with a respiratory
Yep.
device,
Hmm.
that could be a challenge, or even clinical or chronic conditions like COPD or
Hmm.
chronic obstructive pulmonary disease. But also, yeah, as you mentioned, maybe at altitude,
Yeah.
you're
Wow.
obviously going to get a little bit lower amounts of oxygen availability, and creatine could be a benefit in that particular situation.
Wow. Okay. So with the sleep deprivation, and maybe you tell me, I imagine these doses that they looked at in the studies maybe are vary. What, if you recall, what doses were they using, and how, and particularly in the sleep deprivation, I'm curious, were they having them utilize creatine leading up to a period of sleep deprivation? So more of like a preventative, or was it after the fact? I woke up, I realized I only got 3 hours of sleep last night. Now I can take creatine and it's going to help my brain today. How did that fall? Can you break it down for us?
For sure. So, kind of both
Mm,
protocols were utilized.
hmm.
So, there's actually a pretty cool study that was done in rugby players where they
Mm,
looked at passing accuracy
okay.
when they were in a rested state, when they got a good sleep versus when they got a really poor sleep.
Mm,
And what they found was their passing accuracy went way down when they didn't get a good sleep.
yeah.
So, no real surprise there. But if they got a poor sleep and then they took some creatine in the morning, a couple hours before the passing accuracy
Hmm.
test, it completely negated that sleep deprivation or that poor
Wow.
sleep. So that was a pretty cool study that's, yeah, shows in at least in the sport world that, it can have an effect even after you have a bad sleep. So if you have a bad sleep, wake up, take some creatine for sure.
Yeah.
Another pretty cool study that just came out, they took a very large dose of creatine at night.
Hmm.
So they actually used it. It was a relative dosing protocol. So it was 0.35 grams of creatine per kilogram of body mass
Okay.
that they ingested. So I don't know. That's
I
like,
can do some math
they,
for you. I always have
yeah,
my
you could do
calculator
some math.
here.
Yeah.
0.035. So for a 150-pound person, that's 23.8 grams of creatine. Does that sound right?
Yeah, that sounds about right. Yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, you would convert pounds into kilograms
Hmm.
and then yeah, multiply it by 0.35. So yeah, it sounds about right. So maybe 25, 30 grams, depending on the weight of the
Hmm.
individual. And then they had a night of sleep deprivation,
Mm.
and they showed improvements in cognitive performance. And they also measured how much creatine they got in the brain. And there was a significant increase in the brain creatine content in that study as well. So
Cool.
pretty cool. Yeah. And
Wow.
then
Okay.
there's been a couple other studies where they've taken creatine, for example, for a few days or a week,
Hmm.
and looked at the impacts of sleep deprivation. And again, they were in some of the sleep deprivation negative effects were improved with the creatine condition.
Cool. That's so great. And so with the 0.35 grams per kilo the night before a sleep deprivation, do you recall what kind of memory or cognitive tasks they were having them do that they improved
They
on?
did a variety of different cognitive tests on
Mm,
these. So they're all like computer-based cognitive
gotcha.
tests to
Hmm.
measure multiple cognitive domains.
Mm-hmm.
And in a variety of them, they showed improvements in the creatine group. Plus,
Wow.
that study also measured brain creatine content as well.
Hmm.
So they showed that that was also increased, which I think is,
Wow.
again, super cool. And it was just one dose. They
Yeah.
just ingested it one time. So you, again, if you know you're going to have a bad sleep or you need to stay up all night to do some sort of work or
Yeah.
maybe an ultra endurance race or something like that, then yeah, I would definitely consider taking creatine in that situation.
That's really fascinating because what it makes me think of with our listeners and population is when they do have a race, oftentimes they do not sleep very good the night before the race, right? And ideally, they've done all the training things beforehand. But if we have a compromised night of sleep before the race, and that when we know that's pretty common, and certainly if they're going to race at altitude, hypoxia, maybe there's a place for that. Do you, with a dose that large, so 23 or more grams of creatine, that would typically be a loading dose. Would we see any negative consequences of like water retention? And I guess in a weight-based sport or power to weight ratio sport, do you think there would be any cons there?
I think if you're doing like an ultra race, for example, I think hydrating the muscle is important. We
Yes.
know that even if you consume carbohydrates, for example, that's going to pull some water into the muscle. So each gram of glycogen also has 2.7 grams of water as well. So people always think of that as bad, like, oh, you're going to have water in your muscle and like that's going to be really detrimental. But I'm like, well, it's kind of hydrating the muscle. And we know that hydration is super important as well. There was one study that was done in runners where they showed that their performance actually got worse. So they ran slower than what they expected, and the authors suggested that it might have been associated with that increase in body mass.
Mm.
So of course, having too much of a big increase in body
Mhm.
mass could be of detriment to endurance performance, but yeah, that's one single study. It's
What?
never
Yeah.
been replicated. Um, yeah, I think there could be some other great benefits to creatine that
Yeah.
maybe could benefit endurance athletes for sure.
Yeah, yeah. I ask because I get that question from my athletes all the time, or the fear, right? They don't, maybe they have a hilly race and there's lots of climbing and they want to be lighter. They have that fear yeah, coming to the start line a little heavier and trying to move more weight. But yes, to your point, if you're more hydrated, you're gonna have a lower RPE. You're gonna delay dehydration risk. And then better cognitive functioning. You know, you're able. I imagine like being able to quickly see a pothole you're trying to dodge or a rock or something that you're trying, and you can react quickly with hopefully without crashing or flatting or something like that. So I see benefit there.
Totally. Yeah, I actually did a an ultra race, but it was a part of a team.
Oh, cool.
So my wife's family's a little bit crazy. And so we went on this family vacation, and part of that was like, oh, let's do this ultra race. It was a 100-mile race,
Oh,
and my leg of the race was 32 kilometers. So I don't know what that is in mile, like 20 some miles.
yeah. Wow.
And it was 1,400-meter elevation gain and loss. And I started at midnight, and I've never ran at night before. But yeah, the cognitive demand of that particular race was like ridiculous to me.
Yeah.
So watching your steps, going down super steep hills,
Yeah.
yeah, like any little misstep and the race could be over essentially at any point.
Yes.
So anything you can do to improve your cognitive performance in those situations, I think can actually play a big role.
Yeah.
And I think are super, super important.
Yeah. That is very fascinating. Okay. Now I have a very interesting thing. I'm sure this has not been studied yet. And I don't know if you see this. This is totally off topic, kind of. I have noticed in my years of practice, it seems like every year, like clockwork, right around this time of year. So for our listeners, end of summer, going into fall, athletes have gone through a big season of training, racing. Maybe they're coming to the end of their races, whether we're talking cycling or kind of peak in the ultra and stuff like that. And it seems like I get like a good chunk of my athletes. And when I say good chunk, like five, which is five athletes all at around the same time get injured by like freak accidents. Like they roll an ankle, they decide to try and do a jump on their mountain bike and crash. I had another cyclist, someone in front of her crash and she crashed. And it's just, there's like, and I wonder, this is just me thinking out loud, but I wonder what happens with brain creatine through a race season too for an athlete. If there's I have different theories of why I keep seeing injuries, like freak injuries happen, but I wonder if there's something going on there too, like they're dwindling or changing. Just thinking out loud.
For sure. There's one study that I'm thinking of right now. They actually measured in mountain bikers
Oh,
their cognitive performance with creatine. So it was a Brazilian researcher, Dr. Marcado, that's did the
mm,
research and found improvements in some computer-based cognitive testing,
cool.
but in these mountain bikers. So
Yeah.
maybe there could be a benefit to it. So yeah, I
Yes.
totally agree that particularly late in the season when you're tired and you have all this kind of fatigue, then that's where injuries start to occur, and maybe that's where creatine could play a
Yeah.
role.
Okay, so fascinating. Okay, so we talked about sleep deprivation and cognitive functioning. I want to dive into TBI. Yes. So share with us what we're seeing with creatine utilization and TBI and when and how to utilize that.
For sure. So this data is very limited, but there is data. It was an open labeled randomized control trial, which so randomized control trials are good where you're randomized to either a placebo or a creatine group. Um, but an open label study means that you know what supplement you're receiving. So that's kind of a limitation of that particular design. So in research, we try to blind those things usually. So you don't know if you're getting like the supplement or you're getting a placebo. But the only study that's been done in humans was a open label study. So they
Mm,
knew what they were consuming.
mhm.
They used a very high dose. It was actually 0.4 grams. So even a little bit higher than that sleep deprivation study
Wow.
per kilogram of body mass. And this study was also done in children and adolescents
Hmm.
following a severe traumatic brain injury.
Wow.
And they showed improvements in a variety of different things. So they measured like mood, they measured hospital stay or length of
Mm,
stay. They measured all these things that could are associated with having a TBI and looking at recovery, and a lot of them were actually improved with the creatine group. So
wow.
that's the only study that's ever been published, but it seems promising that
Mm,
creatine can improve several aspects associated with recovery following a TBI.
wow. And this was zero point 0.4 grams per kilo per day, like as soon as possible since being diagnosed with a concussion or TBI?
Yeah, so
Okay.
that's my understanding from that particular study, and it was actually a 6 month
Wow.
study. So they gave very high dose of creatine every single day for 6 months.
Wow. Wow. That's really helpful information, I think, for certainly I know our cyclists get into a lot of crashes and can hit their head. Runners, hopefully less so, but it does still happen. And yeah, I think that's really helpful. Do you recall if they were taking that all in one dose or are they split dosing that throughout the course of the day?
I don't recall from that specific study, but yeah. So the general recommendation is to separate it out at
Mhm.
least during the loading protocol for the muscle
Mhm.
performance. So if you do consume a ton of creatine at one time, there are some individuals that experience a little bit of GI distress. So
Mm,
yeah, probably separate it throughout the day if you're consuming that large of a dose.
yeah. Okay. Awesome. And for our listeners, what form of creatine should they take?
Creatine monohydrate.
Awesome.
There's I think there's over 80 alternative forms of creatine, and the most researched. We know it's very safe. It's effective in a variety of different situations. But the bioavailability is very good. So there's some alternative forms such as creatine HCl or hydrochloride. They suggest that it has better absorption, but it's not really the case. Creatine monohydrate's nearly all absorbed, so it's hard
Wow.
to get better than 100% absorption.
Yeah.
So yeah, my recommendation at this point is just stick to creatine monohydrate.
Okay. And what are your thoughts on Crea Pure? So that is a trademark version of creatine monohydrate?
So yeah, there's it's a creatine manufacturer,
Okay.
and there's only two countries in the world that manufacture creatine monohydrate. So that's kind of mind blowing to people. They're
Yeah.
like, what? Like So those two countries are actually Germany and China.
Mm,
And so Germany has this creatine manufacturer, and they're called Creapure.
hmm
And so a lot of brands use their particular creatine. So yeah, that's and they've supported a lot of research. They've
hmm
supported some of my research, so maybe I'm biased, but I know that Creapure is pure creatine
hmm
monohydrate and has been very effective in the studies that I've implemented.
Awesome. And for our athletes, always make sure you get a creatine that's third party tested. So NSF certified for safe for sport or informed choice. Not informed choice, but NSF for sport and informed sport, I think are the two, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, always get them third party tested. So the creatine that I get is directly from the manufacturer,
Nice.
Creapure. So I never have to really deal with that buying supplements from the supplement store. But yeah,
Yeah.
you need to be very cautious with the supplements that you do buy and make sure that they are independently tested.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. Since we were talking about creatine supplements, really quick, what are your thoughts on creatine gummies?
So that's a great question. To this day, there's actually been no creatine gummy research study.
Okay.
So I'm a scientist. I love evidence, and I love using that evidence to influence my decisions.
hmm
At this point, there's no creatine gummy studies, so I'm hesitant to just recommend creatine.
Yeah.
There was one analysis where they actually did. They tried to find out if those gummies actually contain creatine,
Oh.
and about half the gummies that they tested failed the test miserably. So some of them had zero creatine in it. And there's also the risk is when you put it in a gummy or in a liquid, it gets converted into creatinine. So it's like
Oh.
a byproduct of creatine.
hmm
And some of those gummies, they had no creatine and they had no creatinine as well. So it suggested that there was no creatine there to even
Oh,
begin with. So
shoot.
buyer beware with regards
Yes.
to buying creatine gummies, but there were a few creatine gummy brands that actually did contain creatine.
Mm.
So it does appear to be possible to put creatine in the gummies, and yeah, they're delicious. They're maybe more expensive, but if you're traveling or something like that, they're kind of nice to have creatine gummies
Yeah.
versus carrying around some white powder.
Yeah, that's good to know. It's always good to have some third party testing on actual ingredient dosing in a product. So, one of the other areas that you looked at with creatine was mental health. So, depression, anxiety, PTSD. Can you share with us a little bit about what you saw in that testing and dosing, duration? What did you find?
For sure. So there's again kind of a growing body of research in that area. There was a big cohort study, so they looked at about 20,000 individuals, and they actually estimated how much creatine they were getting in their diet.
Mm,
So not even supplementing with creatine, just like how much do you get in your diet.
hmm
And they showed that those that consume more creatine in their diet had a lower risk of depression.
mm,
So that was pretty cool, but those types of studies don't show cause and effect.
hmm
But there has been a couple randomized control trials that have shown a benefit of creatine to reduce depression as well. But it's also important to note that this isn't just don't do any of your regular medication that's important for depression. This was an adjunct therapy in
Right.
addition to that as well, but it does seem to be a promising to actually reduce depression as well.
Cool. And with dietary, for our listeners, where would someone get creatine in their diet?
For sure. So mainly red meat, but seafood is a great source of
Mm,
creatine as well. So things like salmon, um, but it's actually a little bit challenging to get a lot of creatine from salmon, for
mm.
example. You'd have to consume about 2.5 pounds or about 1 kilogram of salmon to get about 5 grams of creatine.
Wow.
So yeah, that's maybe not recommended to do every single day, but
hmm
obviously it is possible to get it from those some of those food sources. Herring, actually, the fish has the highest amount of creatine in it.
Really?
But again, you would have to consume over a pound of herring just to get about 5 grams of creatine.
Okay.
So there are food sources, but they're quite limited with regards to getting higher doses of creatine.
Right. So are you saying herring has the most creatine per gram relative to all, like even red meat, or just compared to fish?
Even compared to red meat as well.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow. I didn't realize that.
Yeah.
Huh. Dang. That is, yeah, well, that's good to know. And is it found in any plants?
No.
Okay.
So if you're vegan or vegetarian, yeah, you're not getting any dietary creatine intake, and that's why at the muscle level we know that there's quite a big difference between vegetarians and omnivores. Who actually vegetarians have lower amounts of creatine within their muscle. The brain is actually different. Um, so they've looked at brain creatine content between vegetarians and omnivores, and they actually found no difference.
Oh,
So where we
interesting.
do see a big difference at the muscle level, we don't see any difference at the brain level.
That's fascinating. So I mean, the body prioritizes brain creatine over muscle, maybe?
I think so. Yeah, I think that's the speculation.
Yeah.
And yeah, your body does a pretty good job of looking after that kind of important part of the body, the
Yes.
brain.
Yes. Okay, so in your study, I'm not gonna break down what this acronym stands for because I'm gonna embarrass myself for the listeners. But GAA showed some promising potentials here in the literature. Can you share with us a little bit about GAA? What is it? Why is it something that we're starting to look into?
For sure. So GAA is just a precursor to creatine. So creatine itself is derived of 3 amino acids, but if you put the first 2 amino acids together, arginine and glycine, it forms GAA.
Mm.
Yeah, one of my co-authors on the paper, his name is Dr. Sergey Ostojic. He's probably one of the best researchers on creatine supplementation, but particularly with GAA as well. And he's showing that, yeah, if you take this supplement, you can actually get kind of bigger increases
Hmm.
in brain creatine content compared to just creatine monohydrate. So
Interesting.
that was really, really interesting. Um, Important though is the toxicity of GAA isn't well established, and the safety profile is not well established.
Mm,
And the FDA currently does not approve GAA as a supplement. So
gotcha.
even though there's some promising research, and maybe Dr. Ostojic is onto something pretty cool, yeah, we still don't have FDA approval to use GAA as a supplement. It is approved in chicken feed though. So
Interesting.
if you're a chicken, then maybe you can take this
Get some
supplement.
GAA. Interesting. I wonder, so does GAA increase creatine in a chicken as well, I would imagine?
I have no idea, but
Yeah.
probably, yeah.
Oh, that's interesting. Okay, so I want to be mindful of your time here. For our listeners, I would say the majority of our population probably lands in like 20 to maybe even 50-year-old active endurance-based athletes. If they're wanting to kind of take things to the next level, how should they or should they dose with creatine? And if so, what should the dosing protocol be?
For sure. So from the muscle level, we know as little as kind of 3 grams, but most people take about 5 grams per day.
Mhm.
For the brain level and the cognitive benefits, I suggest around 10 grams per day. And as we've kind of discussed, there's a few situations and a few studies that have used even higher doses, 20 or
Mhm.
30 grams of creatine per day. So maybe in those crazy stressful situations, you can up your dose a little bit.
Mhm.
But in most situations, yeah, I would just suggest either 5 for the muscle or 10 grams per day for the brain benefits.
Awesome. And do we need to do a loading phase with the creatine?
You do not have to load with creatine for the muscle performance benefits. It's not required. And the brain, yeah, I think just taking 10 grams per day, you don't have to worry about the loading phase, just makes it simpler.
Hmm.
And yeah, you can get some of the benefits.
Interesting. On the loading phase, or even just getting creatine into the muscle, I know for the muscle for a long time, they were saying you could load at 20 grams per day was that to fully saturate, like to the max capacity, your muscles with phosphocreatine?
Yeah. So if you did that loading phase, typically you took 20 grams per day, you'd separate that into 4 doses throughout the day. You do that for a week, you can saturate your muscles. So you get that 20 or 30% increase in creatine and phosphocreatine in the muscle. And then you could drop to a maintenance dose just to maintain those levels.
Mm-hmm.
But now we know that that's not really necessary. There was a recent study that looked that there was multiple groups, but they had two creatine monohydrate groups. One did the loading phase, one did not. They combined it with strength training. And they looked at changes in muscle size and muscle strength, and there was no difference between the loading group and the non-loading group. So my recommendation is usually just not to load with creatine. It's not necessary.
Yeah.
And yeah, you can still get all the benefits.
Awesome. And is there a certain time of day relative to someone's training session that they should consume their creatine?
So if you're just starting to take creatine, I suggest to take it close to the exercise.
Mhm.
The exercise kind of sensitizes the creatine transporters to take up a little bit more creatine.
Oh, interesting.
And yeah, so if you're just starting to, fill your muscles with creatine or trying to saturate them, then yeah, take it close to exercise. So there was a pretty cool study where they did unilateral cycling. So they
Mm.
biked with one leg until exhaustion. So I think it was like 60-minute protocol or something like that. And then they took creatine, and then they took muscle biopsies, and
Mhm.
they showed that the leg that exercised was able to take up more creatine than the non-exercise leg.
Wow, that's cool. And then I have a listener question that came up. Breastfeeding moms potentially getting sleep deprivation. Is it safe for them to consume creatine in those sleep deprived states to help with cognition?
That's a great question.
Do we know?
um, so yeah, so there's a pretty cool research area that's really exploding,
Mhm.
and is looking at creatine during pregnancy or
Cool.
during breastfeeding as well.
Hmm.
One researcher from Australia, her name is Stacey Ellery.
Okay.
She uh, published some data this year that looked at creatine during the third trimester
Mm.
and showed that basically those pregnant women metabolize creatine the exact same way as a non-pregnant
Hmm.
woman did. So yeah, there doesn't seem to be any real safety concerns.
Okay.
There is some evidence that if you supplement with creatine, that you can increase the amount of creatine in breast milk. So it is going through the mom to the baby.
Hmm.
The impact that that would have on the baby is currently unknown.
Okay.
So my advice right now is pretty cautious, just
Hmm.
because, yeah, you don't want to do any harm to a growing baby.
Right.
And so until we have more data, I have a feeling that it's safe, but yeah, until we have that scientific data, yeah, it does get to the baby, and we don't know the true impact.
Hmm. Yeah, that's fascinating. I wonder, I mean, there's got to be maybe a little bit of naturally occurring creatine, right, coming out in breast milk, without supplementation.
Absolutely, yes. So there is already some
Hmm.
that's being delivered to the baby, but it's about a four-fold increase
Oh,
if you
wow.
supplement with creatine. So
Yeah.
yeah, it is a much higher dose, and then of course the kidneys have to filter it, and um, if the baby's kidneys and body is developing, the impact that it's having on them,
Mhm.
we don't know at this point.
Okay. Excellent. And I'm going to touch back a little bit to our endurance athletes, and we may have covered this a little bit, but the ultra and adventure athletes facing the sleep loss. So thinking about you and your ultra that you did through the night, what would a race month creatine plan look like? Should they taper it all? Should they continue on with the same dosing protocol every day leading up to the race and on race morning? Should they take it during the race? What do you suggest?
So once, basically, I think you need to saturate your muscles. So
Hmm.
again, you can do that loading protocol if you want,
Hmm.
take 20 grams per day for about 5 to 7 days or a week
Hmm.
to saturate your muscles, or you can just have a lower dose of creatine, maybe 3 to 5 grams per day. that's going to take about 4 weeks to saturate your muscles. So
Okay.
depending when your race is and when you want those benefits, yeah, you can kind of time that out accordingly. But yeah, I don't think it matters if you uh, like which protocol you actually select. And yeah, you can take creatine right up to the race itself.
Hmm.
We're actually I'm collaborating on a study where we're looking at the impacts of creatine 20 grams per day, 1 week before an ultra race. So it's a 50-mile race. So there's
Cool.
a researcher from Appalachian State University that I'm collaborating with. And so hopefully we can collect some data and find out if it has any impact on
Yeah.
the ultra endurance runners.
Oh my gosh. Definitely want to have you back when that's published. Yeah, that would be fascinating. Wow. So would they use it in an ultra at all during the race? Would there be any benefit to mixing creatine in their like flasks or bottles through the night?
So originally I would be like, no, I don't think it actually does. But because once it's saturating the muscle, it takes about 4 to 6 weeks to return back to baseline.
Mm-hmm.
But maybe for the cognitive
Mm-hmm.
benefits, it might. And
Mm-hmm.
yeah, that recent study with sleep deprivation where they showed a single dose can actually increase brain creatine levels. So maybe there is a strategy during the race, if you can take some creatine, it could be a benefit, but nobody
Yeah.
has researched that so far. Yeah, that's a great question.
Fascinating. And back to your rugby, I think it was rugby you said with their it was a catching and throwing accuracy.
Yeah,
They consumed the creatine 2 hours before practice, right?
yeah.
And what was their dose? Do you recall?
I believe they use 20 grams of creatine.
Oh wow, yeah, okay, yeah, fascinating. It's so interesting. So much stuff to discover and find out. Okay, so okay, we're getting close on time here. What's coming down the pipeline for you? What are you curious to continue testing and looking at research wise? And it doesn't have to be creatine related, but you tell me.
So a lot of it is creatine related, and
Yeah.
obviously that ultra endurance study
Hmm.
I'm very excited about. We're doing a muscle performance study where we're taking creatine daily versus just taking it on training days, and they're
Hmm.
training 3 times a week, and we're going to find out if there's a difference.
Hmm.
So from the muscle level, I don't think there'll be much of a difference if you take it daily versus just on training days. Maybe for the brain benefits, you need to take it a little bit more regularly.
Hmm.
We're also doing a creatine golf study as well.
Well,
And
cool.
in the golf world, creatine kind of exploded last summer. Rory McIlroy, he won the Masters.
Yeah.
There's a video of him going around where he was talking about taking actually 20 grams of creatine per day, and that was enhancing
Wow.
his golf performance. So we'll find out if it actually has an
Yeah.
impact on golf. But yeah, we're doing quite a few studies at the moment.
That's so cool. Okay, one last question for you. Creatine and creatinine in when people are going for their kind of maybe like annual physical and they're getting their labs tested, is there any concern with what it would do to their blood work? Or if something is high, what would that be? And should it be of concern? Or would it be a result of creatine supplementation?
So yeah, so creatinine is a byproduct of creatine metabolism. So creatine is non-enzymatically broke. It just means that it's like broken down into this molecule. And then our kidneys need to filter that particular molecule. So in a normal situation, if it starts to rise, that would indicate that your kidneys are not filtering properly. And your doctor is going to look at those values and be like, it is elevated. That's a concern to me. But if you're on creatine, that creatinine value can rise naturally just because you have more creatine in your system.
Mm,
So there's other markers that are really important. One is cystatin C.
mm,
So it's just another marker of kidney function that's not influenced by how much muscle or creatine that you have,
mm,
and or you can measure creatinine clearance,
mm.
not just in the blood, but you need to measure it in the urine. And obviously, it
Oh,
takes a lot more time. It's a lot more kind of effort to
mhm.
get those measurements. But those are things that you'd have to do if you're on creatine supplementation. So
Gotcha.
yeah, I hear that same question a lot that oh, I started taking creatine, my creatinine levels are elevated.
Mm-hmm.
My doctor says I should stop taking creatine immediately. So I suggest measuring some other markers of kidney function.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, just to look at how your kidneys are actually functioning.
And to follow up with that, if someone is not taking creatine, but they've done a very hard event and they got their lab work done shortly thereafter, couldn't they still have an elevation in creatine kinase because of just muscle tissue damage?
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, creatine kinase is a marker of muscle damage. So if you consume a ton of protein, if you do strengthening exercises and create some muscle damage, if you do an ultra race, that can all influence some of the blood work. So
Yeah.
again, you just need to be aware of those things if you're going in for blood work. And I think you need to find a good medical professional that can interpret that data appropriately.
Yes, yes, very important. Okay, we are closing down on time here. So I'm going to jump back to your two truths and a lie. You said you competed in a um, sport canoe polo and you went to the World Games, that you once bowled a perfect game and that you ran a sub 33-minute 10K. I was leaning on the canoe polo thing being the lie. Is that accurate? Which one was it?
That is not a
No. Oh my gosh. Wow. That's cool. I've never heard that.
Yeah,
Um,
you have to look it up.
when was that? How long ago?
That was in 2013, so quite a
Wow.
few years ago now, but it was in Colombia.
Cool.
Yeah, they have these, it's called the World Games. It's actually bigger than the Olympics, and there's more participants in it. And
How have I
it
never heard of
has
this?
everything from like bowling to tug of war, skydiving.
Oh
I
my
don't know,
gosh.
all these obscure sports that are not obviously at the
Yeah.
Olympics, but yeah, so I
Wow.
participated in a sport called canoe polo or kayak polo at
Cool.
that particular event.
That's so neat. So you're on a team like how polo would normally operate, right? But in
Yeah,
water
so
on a canoe?
it's played 5-on-5. The nets are suspended in the air, so they're actually like a meter by a meter and a half.
Whoa.
And the goalie just holds up their paddle and tries to whack the ball down.
My gosh.
And yeah, you just paddle around, you pass the ball around, and just like water polo, and try to
Yeah.
throw it in the opponent's net. So
That's
yeah, it's pretty cool.
cool. All right. So which one was the lie?
I'm a horrible bowler. So
Oh,
there's
okay.
no way I could ever bowl a perfect
Yeah.
game. So,
Okay.
yeah, I did run a sub 33-minute 10K. I used to run cross
That's
country
great.
at the university level, and yeah, I'm nowhere near that now. But once I used to be able to
Yes.
run. Yeah.
That's amazing. Amazing, amazing. Okay, well, I got that one wrong, but now I have to look up World Games and canoe polo. So that's a cool thing I learned today as well. So this has been really fascinating, and I very much appreciate your time, Scott. Thank you so much for joining us. Where can our listeners find you and follow you?
Probably the best is on Instagram. And my handle, if that's what you call it,
Yep,
is
yep.
Scott_Forbes_PhD. Or you can
Perfect.
just like Google search Scott Forbes creatine, and yeah, you'll find a lot of information out there.
Awesome. We will link your Instagram handle in the show notes and the article from today. And again, thank you so much. This has been amazing.
Awesome. Thanks for having me.